Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Ayman for another special review. And this time, we are, of course, reviewing Avatar: The Way of Water. This is our spoiler discussion. Our live streams talk about the film, the major points, the box office, the technology, your experiences watching it. So this is going to be a fun one. And firstly, before we even get into things, Ayman, how are we doing tonight?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. A little bit tired because I got back from the screening that I saw at about 11:30 last night. But yeah,
Does that mean you missed the football?
no. So just before I left, um,
Was it
uh,
penalties?
yeah. I didn't. I missed the bit where they were lifting the cup and everything, but I saw the penalty shootout.
That's fine. I should have asked that last night, to be fair. I think you texted me really late, and I was like, wait, he wasn't watching the Argentina game. But anyway, World Cup aside, although we've got a light blue background, if you don't know who we're repping for this tournament, we are, of course, talking Avatar: The Way of Water. It's been out in cinemas. A lot of people have seen it. It's made a lot of money the first couple of days. A lot of people are talking about it, whether it's good things, bad things, everything in between. But we are here to talk about it too. So please do comment below with your thoughts on Avatar. Put anything you want in the chat. Obviously, as long as it's about Avatar, because we want to hear your thoughts on this. We want to hear about your experiences, whether it's you with the technology, whether it's the high frame rate, the variable frame rate. I'm going to get into that. The 3D, did you watch it in 2D? I'm really curious to know what everybody thought and what they went for experiencing it, because there's so many different ways to experience this film. It's strange. So please do get involved. And if you do like this review, if you like this video, definitely hit the like button and subscribe, because I mean, Avatar is going to come back in 2 years' time, but there's going to be a couple of other things you might like if you like Avatar that we're gonna get into at the end of the video, because we've got something to announce. And alongside that, you want to find out about our videos, what else is coming and what's happening. Obviously, it's near Christmas. We're rounding up the year. We're deep into planning stuff for 2023. You're best off following us on social media for some major announcements. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. I'm going to link to Redbubble in the description where you can pick up some merch. But until then, we are, of course, talking Avatar: The Way of Water. And Ayman, you joined me a couple of months ago, I guess, which is a great starting point for our review on the original Avatar. We went to the IMAX 4K remaster, and it was a high frame rate for that, but obviously it wasn't shot on HFR, so it wasn't as noticeable. But just quickly, just your thoughts from that screening heading up to Sunday when you watched it. I'm just curious, like, were you hyped going in? Had you seen what people have put online before? I'm quite curious in that respect.
Yeah, so because it was so I went to go see it yesterday, which was a Sunday. I was reading reports on the Saturday about how much money it was making, stuff like that. But yeah, going into it, because we went to see the remaster of the first one a couple months ago now. I was really hyped. Not, I was really hyped for it, and I was more curious than anything to see if the second one could live up to the hype and the hype and stuff the first one generated, really.
Yeah, and I think that's fair as well. I mean, from that review, I remember saying I didn't. It's not that I didn't like it. It's just I think because Avatar had this place in not pop culture, but no one talks about it. There's that terrible quote, like, no one can remember anyone's name. But I've always maintained a belief that there's something about it worked because it's the highest grossing film of all time, and it took that title back after Avengers overtook it anyway. So I'm the same as you. Like, for me, a big thing of Avatar is the technology. James Cameron is an incredible film director. His dedication to the craft, his dedication to what he believes in terms of using technology, in terms of trying to get things done. His approach over the decades, you only need to look at even things like Terminator 2, where how important that was at developing motion capture, the Abyss, you got the water sequence. So many things is him, like a George Lucas, pushing the boundaries of what you can do. And then you've got the physical side of which isn't great in terms of what he also won't let people do, such as nipping to the loo during filming the Titanic, and lots of stories like that. There's a great video for anyone curious last night. He won't sign for autograph dealers in America, so they start booing him. He just sticks his finger up out the car window. And I thought, one absolute legend. And if anyone's curious about that, I've been to those kind of events. Those people aren't fans, not when they're going in like that. And he's just had COVID, so why is he going to sign anyway? He missed the premiere for his own film in America. But yeah, I'd say I was pretty hyped heading in. I did the spoiler-free review last week. I say it was a catastrophe. The weather was a catastrophe. The train strikes. Getting down there, I got home at like 1:30 that morning, had the video done and scheduled in by 3 a.m. and then I'd work the next morning after. So if anyone's curious about how busy it can be, that does happen. There's embargoes to meet and whatnot. And again, a lovely shout out to Tom Butler from Bondi said, who helped get me into that screening as well, which I'm not going to hide from. But yeah, going into the rewatch on Friday though, I'm in this sort of perplexity that, you know me, I like IMAX. Like I've always advocated cinema. And the biggest disappointment of that press screening was seeing it in Dolby 3D. And I didn't mind it because I've never been to Dolby, but I knew I had an IMAX ticket booked for the Friday. I wouldn't have gone on the Sunday because of the football. The Saturday, I thought I might have had other plans, so I didn't. So I was like, okay, I have to go on the Friday. I picked it over the work Christmas party, which is great because apparently most of my company now has COVID and their Christmases are ruined. So I look like a genius for not going now. But on the sort of side tangent from that, I also really wanted to go to see all the trailers, which I don't normally say a lot. But if anyone's curious about how the last week of trailers has gone, obviously, you know, Avatar, I don't think will be the highest grossing film of the year, but on paper, it's the biggest film of the year. It's the sequel to the biggest film ever made. It's been 13 years in development, or since the first film. It's the December release date. No one released a film before it or after it. No one's going to release one or Avatar. And in terms of marketing, this is the film that every company needs to get on. On paper, this is the one you've all got to get in on. And if anyone's curious about a list of so-called things, you had an Oppenheimer trailer in normal 2D screenings that's now online. You have the Oppenheimer IMAX trailer, which is not online, which you can get a copy of. You had the Barbie trailer, which we unfortunately didn't get. A 10-minute Mission Impossible preview, which we also didn't get, which I was absolutely fuming about, which is now online today. A Creed behind-the-scenes featurette, an Ant-Man trailer, and an Indiana Jones trailer. So everything marketing-wise was on Avatar. So going to see the film again, I actually wanted to see those adverts because I don't think I'd have probably have gone to the IMAX not so soon after seeing it for the first time. But obviously, it would have helped heading into today's screening. And I know I've sort of gone on a massive tangent, and I'm not here to talk about Oppenheimer as much as I really want to. I know me did a chat before. But just my initial thoughts on the film. I loved it on the first viewing. Again, to me, you know, I was like a child of the prequel generation of Star Wars. It's the tech that really gets me involved. I don't want to say I'm not fussed in the story because I was invested in the story and the characters. There's a really quick off chance, but I am watching Avatar to see the technical innovation of the industry move forward. And I don't think there's any shame with people saying that. People want story, which you're clearly entitled to. There's not a problem with that. But I also want to see technical boundaries be pushed in ways that haven't been done and won't be done, or what new technologies is everyone going to copy for the next 10 years, like what they did with 3D from 2009. So it's a really interesting one, but kind of jumping over to you, like, what were your like initial thoughts? Like, because you texted me last night about it, but I'm just curious about like your initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. I was in the same sort of vein where, because Avatar 1 came out, I think it was 13 years ago. At that time, it was the film to watch because it was pushing all these boundaries, especially in 3D. So I had that sort of curiosity because I wanted to see why the wait, like the reason for the wait of 13 years. And I think it really shows in the film because you've got all these sort of shots where even if they're high frame rate, I mean, some of these shots could have been pulled from like a David Attenborough documentary. Like if you showed me some of these shots and you had David Attenborough like narrating over it, wouldn't surprise me. But I think like even just the CG, like I didn't know Kate Winslet was in the film until I saw her name come up in the credits. Zoe Saldana as well. I didn't put that face to. I knew who her character was, but I couldn't distinguish between Zoe Saldana's face and Letitia's face. And the fact that I really enjoyed the first one, so I wanted to see. It's. I think it's because it's a pop culture thing as well. You want to see where this led to.
Yeah, and it's fair as well. Like, I think one thing that really caught me off guard, and this is nothing really to do with it, but yesterday I was out with some family in the morning, and one of my younger cousins was there who, God, I think he's about 18 or 19 now. I want to say 18. And they were seeing it that night. And the other cousin was sort of saying like he was obsessed with that when he was a kid. And it kind of got me worrying in the head, like not how old have I become, but that was a mega film for a lot of people. And I remember, okay, we were at school when that came out and we were a bit older, but I guess when people talk about pop culture, which is a bit ridiculous, it's they didn't make sequels, so you didn't get that knock-on effect of every 2 years there being an Avatar film, which we're going to get now, at least for another 2 years. Whether we get 4 and 5, even though 4's already filming and 3 is apparently 9 hours in length, which is insane, apparently. I just don't even know how to respond to finding out that Avatar 3 is 9 hours of footage. Not multiple shots, it's a 9-hour long film. Yeah, I'm just processing that in my head. So I think it's not missed a generation as such, but it's not been able to maintain a generation. And I think in that 13 years, we've had the MCU obviously become the biggest franchise in history at the cinema. And why is that? Because we'd had 3 films a year and pop culture was humongous. And it's really interesting with Avatar now in comparison, of course, Disney buying Fox during this 13 years, Disney making Avatar, they made a Pandora at one of the Disney parks for people to go to. There are big Avatar fans, you just don't hear about it. And I think because it hasn't had a presence, without even getting into the 2010 BBC series Come Fly With Me, as expected, the memes of Taj were doing the rounds this week, which, in that 13 years, that's not aged well at all, that joke. But the Taj memes came out this week, which was lovely to see in a nice way. That I remember that being a big thing at school. But yeah, it's just crazy how much the world changed in the 30s, and kind of heading into the story of this, picking up where Avatar 1 finishes, we get a great overview. And I don't know if they say how long time passes, and it's not really a problem for this, but essentially 13 years passes within Avatar world that we find out what happened in the middle.
Yeah.
They've got a family, they're married, they've got the Sigourney Weaver, child of God in the Avatar. We've got Carl in the comments, which wasn't part of Avatar, but it's lovely to see Carl here as always. Carl, you're a big Avatar fan. So it's really interesting where Avatar picked up. And just sort of talking of the opening 10-15, which is fair. We're not going to do like scene by scene with Be longer than the bloody film. But the big chunk of it was I wondered, how do you tackle a 13-year gap? And a really off-chance comment is kind of, not that we would have wanted it, but it's almost like Star Wars 1 and 2, right? The Attack of the Clones is set 10 years after 1. Obviously, 3 years in reality of filming. But it's interesting that you can have this big time jump and have nothing of not importance happen in the middle. But we don't need to have that 13 years padded out. But we, as a viewer, we get reintroduced to old characters, introduced to new characters. And kind of the opening hour of the film, and up until they leave the jungle, it's almost a catch-up and resetting the stakes of this is what's happening moving forward. And to me, it was really interesting, at least as a viewer, being back in the jungle, because going back to the remaster a couple of months ago, and this will be the first time we bring up the frame rate stuff. One of the first things that struck me with this film isn't the CG, because not in an arrogant way, I knew the CG would look phenomenal. I wasn't ever going to put it past them. I think it's still Weta that do the visual effects for this, and I do think they're the best at motion capture. It was the high frame rate that really caught me. And the first time I noticed it is when they're standing by the campfire and they start running around. And obviously, because I played a lot of PlayStation over the years, I think a common sentence that's being said is it's like a video game. And I guess my counter to that discussion is, well, video games are for 60 frames per second. I think you can get higher ones than that or whatnot, but the history of film is that it wasn't always 24 frames per second. Film wasn't invented at 24 frames per second. 24 frames per second, I think, came in the late 20s, 1928, 29. So it's been here for almost a century, but it wasn't always. So you look at old footage from the 1800s, they have to speed up to match, frame rates. And it's really interesting for me, just getting into the frame rate thing to start with. I don't mind it. I think because we're not used to it as viewers at cinemas, I have no issue seeing it, because in theory, the high frame rate, it makes everything clearer that you can take into, for action set pieces, it's that smoother action. And I guess where the scale goes of people liking and disliking it is it's a clearer image. You can take into appreciation the better CGI. How many times you go on social media and people are pausing bad CGI shots, but it's in the middle of an action set piece. So the frame rate's never going to be right. But you have this crystal clear image throughout this film. And I think the big moment for me at the start as well is when the sky people come down and we get the shot of the ships in space. that's when it kicked in properly. Like, okay, this tech, I don't want to say is here to stay, but like 3D, like Avatar 1, if you get the right person making a film with this technology, you're going to be in for a good time. But I've spoken for ages. I just want to know, what was it like for high frame rate for you?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, so it really kicked in, as you said, like when the ships were pretty much landing, and when you saw them out in space as well. But yeah, so on the Sunday I went with my dad to watch it, and he pointed out the high frame rate helped with those action set pieces because most of the time with those action set pieces, you get blurry in the middle of the shots. You get blurry sort of vision. It's not always very clear. Whereas with this one and the high frame rates, every action shot was crystal clear throughout the whole shot. There was no sort of blur, there was no motion blur or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, the high frame rate, there were certain shots where I could really tell, towards the end where they had the fire blazing, and you could really tell there. And then like just in the middle of shots, when he's I forgot the kid's name. When the son is talking to basically the whale, and shots like that where when it's like swimming around and stuff, all those shots were just really, really clear, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, and I think I remember when we went to the remaster, there was like not a credit scene, but they showed the clip of him meeting the whale. And I remember going to saying, I think this is the higher frame rate because something just looked weird because we'd spent 2 hours 40 with the first film. Then it was like, boom, here's the sequel as it is right now. And that juxtaposition caught me off guard. And even with this one, there are moments where it jumped out in a bad way. And I wouldn't say it's the craft. I think when you'd have a really quick shot, I'm talking like a second, half a second, that would stick out and it'd feel a bit like lag on a PlayStation. And I think with that comes the fact it's this newer tech, but also what people aren't talking about, which is what they really should be talking about. James Cameron is employing variable frame rate as well. So it's been shot in high frame rate, 40 frames per second. But not everything on screen is being displayed in 40 frames per second, which is really annoying me. People aren't talking about this. Some, obviously, with it being 3D, foreground, background, midground, everything, the 3D is great, as we knew it would be for this film. And I will say IMAX 3D was way superior to the Dolby 2D, mainly because it's the square, full image screen. It looked better on the eye. It was easier to take in. It was better with the glasses. There was no, narrow viewing. It was the right way to watch it. And it is IMAX genuinely is the way to watch it. But the variable 3D, so sometimes you have something in the foreground and it was at 24 frames per second. And you're not going to notice it to the eye. But sometimes that didn't work, which is when it clicked at you, which I think was those really quick shots. And it was meant towards the end of Nateri flying down. And it was when they had machine guns as well. And there'd be 2 or 3 things going on. Sometimes it just wouldn't visually work. And it was always the quick cuts. But I'm talking like 95% of it runs perfect. And that's what I was worried about. That I think when Peter Jackson did it for The Hobbit, and I think when me and Sim watched the third one, what one was that? Battle of the Five Armies?
Yes.
That was in high frame rate, I remember. And that was, and after 2 minutes, I'd adapted to it. And it was a weird experience because it didn't feel that big a change. But it's interesting that sort of no one's really done it since Lord of the Rings until, of course, James Cameron comes back to the big screen. And now, because James Cameron's done it, I'm curious if any of the filmmakers will. I don't want it to be a trend. I don't think it's something big enough to be a trend. You can't make money out of saying it's a high frame rate. That's just not going to work. You can make money off 3D as many companies did, but not high frame rate. And obviously, when you book your screenings in advance for anyone at home, certainly at least at Cineworld, it actually says high frame rate.
Yeah.
So like they have like IMAX 3D high frame rate, then it's just IMAX 3D no high frame rate. But they're like the 11 p.m. showings that no one's going to go watch Avatar at 11 p.m. Not when it's 3 hours, 10 minutes before adverts. But yeah, I know we spoke about the high frame rates, but let's talk a bit more about the story. So obviously we've got the opening act. And as anyone watching home, you can comment, let us know your thoughts. If you think we've missed out any characters, any story points you want to hear us talk about, we'll do that. And the same for tech, because I'm not calling someone a tech demo, but that's something a lot of people have said as well. And I think there's a lot of fairness to those comments. I'm going to argue that it is very much experimenting with James Cameron wants to make a 3-hour film where an hour of it's people just scuba diving, going underwater in the sea. I'm okay with that because it's James Cameron and he can do what he wants. But going back to where the film picked up, even before talking about the family, I really want to talk about one of my favorite villains, which is Colonel Miles Quaritch, who we knew was coming back from the dead. I know that years ago they said Stephen Lang would be in it, and I guess it's probably, I don't want to say he's too big of a name to hide, but Stephen Lang I still think is the best thing about the first Avatar film. And I'm in this really tough situation with him in the sequel that I loved him in this film, if I'm being honest. I love the fact he was brought back as an avatar because it's that logic of, you're the very thing you hate, which is a great thing to do to a villain and his team. One of the most random moments of the film is one of them doing weights. Like, you don't need to do weights.
Doing dumbbells.
You're a giant blue alien now who's like super strong. But I love this idea that rather than have the scientists in the avatars, they now had the military in them. And it was a really interesting concept for them to explore. But just going back to Quaritch's character, I loved him in it. I still think he's the MVP of this series. I understand why James Cameron doesn't want to let him go. Obviously, he's alive and he's made it out of this film. And it's very much, I don't know if I said it in spoiler free, but he's very much like the Darth Vader that I think he's just going to keep turning up in the Avatar films. And it reaches a point where I don't mind. Like, I guess it's more like the Emperor than Darth Vader, isn't it? But, and I'm going to add, I loved that we got a cameo from him in human form. Like the whole, because let's be honest, like I think if anyone listens to James Cameron's interviews, and it's very tough to get decent ones at the moment about the tech. He spoke a lot, like he jokes about how he doesn't enjoy writing the scripts for things like Avatar, and it's so much like George Lucas in this respect that he's there to have a good time making films, not necessarily making the story and characters. But I just love the logic. Like, I brought the villain back, so he just uploaded his memories and his avatar now. Job done. And I think it worked. What about you?
I see. That's the thing. Because you told me he was going to be back in the second one, I was like, I did think, like, how are they going to do that? Like, are they just going to have him in like just some random flashbacks? But the way they did it, I was like, see, normally I think it's a cop out, but the way they did it, the fact that he uploaded it before he left for the mission. And the fact that he didn't know how he died, and that sort of bit, I think, solidifies it. It doesn't make it a cop out because it's logical. Like he wouldn't have uploaded his consciousness like mid battle because that's just not. I mean, that's just weird. The fact that he did it before, with the possibility of him actually dying, is quite intelligent, and I really liked it.
And we got the cameo of Phoebe's brother from Friends, so he's still technically returned. And this is where I kind of am with it, that, and I don't want to make a comment to the obvious Star Wars thing here, but it's not like he came back in Avatar 5 and was like, by the way, I'm alive and I have been alive the whole time. This was it's the sequel. James Cameron wants him in the films. He's going to keep him in the films, and this is how he does it. And I kind of respect that. And it's the same with Sigourney Weaver. I mean, her character is one of my favorites in this film, but when they turned around, I was like, Sigourney Weaver is going to be Avatar. And I was like, but why and how? Because she died in the first one, like Stephen Lang. And before I talk more about Sigourney Weaver, what the coldest shot of the entire film is Stephen Lang's avatar crushing the skull of his actual former self. That's a cold image. The dog tags, the CCTV thing. That's pretty great. Like, I know James Cameron did Terminator, but it was almost Terminator-esque, like just the crushing of the skull, and it was such a great moment and it kind of felt nostalgic in a really right way. Got a great comment by Carl. I really enjoyed the film. I appreciate they took the time building the story and the dynamic, helped the emotions at the end, and this is 100% it when you get to the end of the film, and I'll talk about that. But Sigourney Weaver, just starting to talk about the family. Obviously, I sort of said no one thought she'd come back, and playing the role of Kiri. The not child of Jesus, but it is that so her human form, I'm just trying to picture someone. So the human body that was left in the first film with Awa. Oh, sorry, the avatar form became pregnant, and that was left with Awa on the floor when she died in the first one. Became pregnant.
Both the bodies were left with Awa. Because they tried to transfer the consciousness.
It's Anakin. It's there is no father. It's a miracle, and
I don't know. I think there is a father.
I don't know. I think. I
It's
mean, it
either
depends on the
that,
sequels, right?
yeah. Well,
It's
it's
going to
either
be like
that
an
or
act of God from Awa. I think. I think it's something in
yeah.
that
That's
kind
the
of.
only that's the thing that I see. It's because with Awa and like that sort of mysticism and stuff like that, the Awa basically is like God, where it works
Yeah,
in mysterious ways. So it's like the Immaculate Conception in the biblical story, where technically Awa did do what they wanted, just in its own way.
yeah, and I think certainly for a sequel, but it's going to be, as I say, a sequel, 4 films in theory that are lined up, two,
Mm,
3, 4, and 5. And anyone that does know, James Cameron has wrote all 4 of those sequels, which again, whether we see all 4 is the big question. I'm not
mm,
doubting it, but I am very curious what's going to happen down the line. I'm very curious about tracking money over the next month. I know Avatar 3 is locked in for 2024. Like literally,
yeah.
I think the plan was to alternate Star Wars and Avatar films every December, to have one every 2 years. Obviously, the Star Wars ones aren't happening, which is great. Bob Iger's back, which is even better. And at least Avatar 3, we know, will probably be ready in 2 years' time,
Mm.
because that has finished film, and I think the film in the 4th one, which is insane. But at the same time, I
Oh.
respect them for writing all the sequels. That's with these characters, is that when we've had this big time jump, it makes sense for them to sort of not moved on from Jake and Terry, but it's right for them to have a family now. And in terms of storytelling,
Yeah.
there is going to be stakes. They're a family. There's a threat. There's potential for them to die, which obviously we get at the end. You can
Mm.
develop these characters, and kind of the one thing I won't take with the criticism of the story and the plot, like arguably the plot is bare bones to the logic of they're being hunted down. But you know
Yeah.
what's one of the best action films ever put to camera is Mad Max Fury Road. What's the plot? A car turns left. That's the plot of that
Mm.
film. Car turns left. Um, so I don't mind the simplistic plot as that, but I felt that the characters did get development in this, which is what I feared that more often than not, and even in Terminator 2, which is a James Cameron film, I really struggle with that sort of teenage age of characters. I quite enjoyed them in this. Like, I'm gonna butcher
Mm.
the names, but obviously, we've got, oh god, I don't even know which one's which. If I'm
Um.
being so we've got Kiri, which is Squinty, who we spoke about. Um, we've got Tuk, which is the youngest daughter of the 4.
Yeah.
Um, Loic,
Mm.
which is the second son,
Yep.
and we've got Natem, who's the oldest child.
In the same there. That's the one.
And again, a family of 4. And just
Mm.
maybe jumping into the end, I love the respect that the focus isn't on the oldest being the highborn.
Mm.
He's next in line. He's the favorite son. Like, we get that, but I like the fact that the film focuses on the second brother. That yes, we've got
Mm.
this weird stuff with Kira happening. That she's
Yeah.
a bit different and all this, but the core is on the second brother and how he's going to mature and evolve. And I think
Mm.
where the story takes it is kind of where I sort of dug into it more, is that inherently the middle act is about the kids. It's not about the parents. It's not
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
them being hunted down. The middle act is all about the kids, and
Yeah.
I think that's quite brave in a respect to do that in a sequel. And I think to me at least it works. You've got before in the comments, so I'm torn. Maybe I have to watch it again, but I didn't catch the story. Could be that the visuals were too exceptional, distracting me too much. That's 100% valid as well. Like,
Mm.
it will be really interesting because the second viewing for me at least, or how much I could cope thanks to people on their phones and talking. I love these effects. I knew what was coming up,
Mm.
so I could be a bit more invested in the story. I picked up things more in advance, which always helps. And I think I probably will see it a third time. I like to see it with my dad. He won't see it in 3D at all, and on principle, I won't watch it not in IMAX. So I need to hope that in the new year they start 2D IMAX screenings, because he also wants to watch the Oppenheimer trailer as well. But aside from that, how do you feel with the family of 4, the kids?
I
We'll
think.
talk about Spider in a bit, but I'm curious your thoughts on them all.
Yeah, the kids. I think it was really well done. The fact that they each got their own development in their own ways. Um, like it emphasized that brother relationship between the oldest and the second oldest, and like it did focus on the second oldest a lot, which is really good. Like the fact that James Cameron had the balls to, because I think, considering it was a 3 hour film, I think we saw Jake and Neytiri for what, like 45 minutes to an hour,
Yeah.
maybe altogether. Whereas,
Theory probably even less.
yeah, whereas the kids had the front and center, with the two brothers, the second brother having that hot, like having the main stage with the whale and the relationship that they had, and then with Kiri, and I think they're dropping. I think James Cameron is dropping like cookie crumbs for her being a bigger part, because there was so much unexplained, but there was like leading pathways, like why did she adapt so well? What is that there? Like, because you saw that she adapted really well compared to everyone else, but you didn't see that she was like, we didn't see her much when she was with the Navi, so we don't know what relationship we had with like the forest, and the fact that she can't plug into the spirit tree, otherwise she'll have another epileptic fit, and that's a question as well. It's like, is it actually epilepsy? What, like, there's something still going on there. I think out of the kids though, my favorite was Kiri, and like just because it's more intriguing than anything.
Yeah. I think as well with
Yeah.
Kiri, the logic of like not them like bullying her and stuff, but she's the weird one. You always know that happens in a film. There's just more to it. You know, we get. I mean, I get to the music later, but when we get that moments of sort of asleep breathing with Awa, and then the fact she can swim fine on the first go and no one else can, it is very much that almost chosen one analogy that we're sort of thinking about earlier, and I can see them sticking that. So we've got a great comic art. I love to watch it in 4DX. I would love to, but genuinely, how are you have to take like raincoats? That you know, I did Top Gun in 4DX, which was incredible, and I'd love to do Avatar in it, but I'm genuinely concerned at what they would do to you during the screening. And it's long as well.
Yeah.
But if you do see it, Carl, let me know, because I would be curious, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd stomach this in. I'd be too nervous about the rain. Because
Yeah, I
surely they're
think the
just
first
gonna.
hour. Yeah, I think the first hour would be fine because they're still in the forest. But then you get to like all the ocean sequences, and it's like,
Yeah, and the chair, the chair. I mean, if anyone's ever done 4DX, I did it once in June, and the more I think, but I did the right film for it. Like, you know, the planes would go up in Top Gear, you would fly back, and it would jet past. But yeah, if you do see it, let me know. But just with a couple of the other kids as well, with this, it is interesting that, and it is almost not a passing of the torch, but and I don't mean for the Star Wars comparison again. The logic of the Force Awakens is that the original trio are older now. They are the background, they're the supporting cast, and the younger actors are the lead. Now, obviously, the outcome of that is different, but the logic is there. And it felt like this an Avatar that, yes, we've got, you know, Jake and Neytiri, but they are old, not as old as obviously the the Star Wars cast. They're spitting fair,
yeah,
not
yeah,
had a legacy like those as well. But that logic of the younger generation, these are going to be their films. I'm really curious about if they run with that, how they're going to choose to run with it too. Because I don't think you just have Sigourney Weaver playing a kid because you want us to play a kid. You have Sigourney Weaver playing that child because there's something more going on
yeah,
over the coming
yeah.
years. And I think she was probably the best of the lot. And not any criticism of the other young actors that, you know, they're playing teenagers. They are teenagers. She's a legend of cinema. So it's going to naturally probably be easier for her to play that. And she did a really funny interview where she spoke about she was going to schools for research and just sitting in the back of classrooms. Obviously, you know, kids won't know, but like you turn out, it's like Ripley's behind you in your lesson watching. Obviously, it's like the Billy Madison meme from Adam Sandler as well, if anyone knows that. But let's talk about all the other kids. Spider, who I didn't know anything about this character, right? I know nothing. And then about a week before the film came out, loads of people were doing memes. And I think it's Jack Champion's the actor that played him. And what I couldn't get around was, I've got to think my next words carefully. Not cultural appropriation, but there's a certain kind of white boy with dreadlocks, right? And I just couldn't get over these memes I was seeing. Then someone's like, "This is Avatar 2." I was like, "Excuse me, Avatar 2?" So I couldn't take him seriously to begin with, but I thought he was a good character. Frustrating, yes. But I'll tell you what, and I'm going to give Cameron credit for this, and I don't want to sound like a bellend, so follow me, but I feel this character was created, right? And this really, so I was watching Man of Steel last week, RIP Henry Cavill, according to Twitter. He's fine, but that's how people are acting. And the opening scene is wonderful, the Krypton stuff, and you can blatantly see a green screen behind, oh God, Russell Crowe. Yeah. And it's not distracting because it's a 9-year-old film. And I was watching Avatar 2, and I just sort of sat here. Carl's just done the Star Wars reference. Yes. Sorry. I was watching Avatar 2, and I was like, you wouldn't know this kid's... They're on a motion capture stage with him. They're on the same set. They're in the same studio space. And he is blended in better than any CG character has ever done. He's better blended in than any character I've seen in CG environments. And I feel that he's there, not to discredit the writing, but James Cameron was like, I want to have a character. And it's James Cameron showing that we don't need to criticize, oh, there's a bad green screen anymore. If you can have one human fit in with basically a CGI motion capture cast for 3 hours, you're doing something right. And that's where I kind of am inspired that the technical side of him is wonderful. I don't mind his story side, but how do you feel with him? Because I think there's something else there. It's a technical thing, isn't it? That he's there to me to serve that purpose of look at him, look at this kid with the aliens. He fits in.
Well, I mean, just now I just thought he reminds me of so when in Tarzan, the animated film, it shows him as a younger kid. That is Spider, the white boy with dreadlocks, basically being an ape, a monkey, and he is basically being raised as one of the Na'vi or one of the natives. But him as a character, I didn't mind him to begin with, and then he just annoyed me. Like, his character is so, like, the choices he made towards the end of that film was so annoying. And if you aim for that, I mean, it's nothing against the character, it's nothing against the actor. It's just the fact that, yeah, I mean, I think the writing is really well done. I think it's just the fact that you've just heard who you think is your dad, or who is your dad, basically, just in an avatar body, say, I have no love for this kid. He is not my blood. He's nothing to me. And then about half an hour later, you decide to save that man, but then you just let him go. You've just seen him kill your basically your cousin, lay waste to a whole, like, you've hated this man. You see what destruction he's done when he goes to that first village, and you know this is wrong. You say this is wrong, and you still decide to save him. Like, I don't get it. But that's just my rant about it. But I think the actor did really well. I really like the character. It's just he made some bad choices. But
the logic there, though, of what you said, though, like, it is frustrating in that respect. And I think even when we were introduced him, there was this somber moment. And I'll bring up Carl's comment in a second. And I sat in the cinema watching it, and obviously he's like, we can't all pick our dads. And I was like, surely not. Like, surely he's not Stephen Lang's son. Like, I can't imagine Stephen Lang having a baby on that base, but I don't care. And I just thought about it, and to their credit, and I'll do it. I need to stop comparing Star Wars. Like The Force Awakens, right? There was no big deal of Han Solo, I'm your father at the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It was like end of opening acts, like Snoke, that's your dad, mate. And you already knew that. It's just you're not going to make it a big deal for the viewers, which is also fine. And I love that we had the same in this, that he meets his dad in the first, the first set piece they're together. There's no big reveal it's his dad. He knows it's him. And I love the fact is that this poor child's grown up without a parent, basically, just being told about how terrible your dad is. You've been basically, raised by the people he was trying to murder. And I love this inner conflict with him that, as you said, the dad says nothing to him. Now, he's obviously baiting them, and he can't call Natiri's bluff, which is also very well set up at the start of the film, and Natiri still hates him. So you think, is she actually going to kill him? Which I think is really well engraved into that. But
it also shows Natiri, just a side point, Neytiri doesn't like the kid,
Yeah.
because like when he rolls down, when they're escaping, she doesn't show any sort of
Remorse.
concern for the kid. Yeah, she doesn't show any concern for him, which I think is because she hates the Colonel so
Humans.
much. It's just bled over to him as well as a kid, which is it's with no fault of his own. Like Kiri says, you are not your dad. But he can't shake that feeling that his dad is this basically the scourge of the Na'vi, basically.
The planet. He's like not the planet killer,
Yeah.
but it's a great. I think it's a great thing for them to do. And kind of James Cameron's in that George Lucas school of, yeah, well, I didn't need to plan it 13 years ago. I've just chosen to do it and we're going to run with it, which is why it works. And I think obviously the big purpose is the son keeps the dad alive to pop up for the next film. And what's going to happen if Spider's the big thing. Will he eventually turn to his dad? Will he turn on the Na'vi? I don't know. And I think that inner debate's going to be going for a while. And bring up Carl's comment, which speed size difference. I thought the fans mentioned the fish attacked by the fish. I thought there's always a big fish. I'm not kidding to you, and I can have this verified by a lot of people. The moment that big fish turned up, I turned to Tom and Scott from Spy Hard was there, and I said, "There's always a bigger fish." We sort of laughed, and then the fucking whale came at the end and obviously massacred it. I mean, I just burst like into tears laughing, and he did as well. No one else is laughing, by the way, because obviously it's the bigger fish joke, and then. There's this terrible habit people have at press screenings. They tweet like people have already seen the film, which pisses me off so much. And at 2 a.m. after that screening, I just tweeted George Lucas has done it again, and I put the "There's always a bigger fish" gif on. So that is there,
now.
but I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it to be like, oh, look what I've seen earlier. Like people were talking about the arms being ripped off, which was a great moment on Wednesday, and I was like, it's not a spoiler, but do you need to talk about that? Like people have, it's not released, people can't see it, so. Frustrating at times, but no, I love that reference. And listen, if anyone's curious, we spoke a lot about Star Wars. Like one of the reasons why it's not just I love it, but James Cameron and George Lucas. There's a really good interview with the pair of them from a couple of years ago, and it's just those two talking about film, talking about tech, storytelling, and everything. And they're so similar in their own right. And the one problem I have with Avatar, which isn't Avatar's fault, is that it makes me really miss George Lucas making films. Of his approach that he doesn't care what people think, like James Cameron. He makes the film he wants to make. He does good tech, and everyone comes and praises him. And I think obviously George Lucas, was hounded in the early noughties, and to the credit of you and everyone else in the last 5 years, they're all coming out sort of apologizing for them saying Star Wars prequels are bad and stuff. And I do anything for a George Lucas film at the moment. We're not going to obviously get one. He's busy building his museum, which looks incredible. But anyway, going back to Avatar away from George Lucas, we spoke a lot about the high frame rate, the 3D, some of the characters. Should we talk about the way? I don't even the way. Why?
Well, do you want to talk about the actual other kids first, like the?
Yes. Sorry. Yes. 100%. Let's talk about the other tribe. Thank you for bringing that up because the whale being hunted. Oh, okay. We got to come out the whale. Right. Okay. So if I can try and so what's really embarrassing is my parents were shopping in Birmingham on Saturday. They rang me. They're in Waterstones, and Waterstones Birmingham is like 6 stories high. But it's got really good film books. They're like, there's an Avatar DK visual dictionary. Do you want it? And I said no. And I sat here like I could have done with it for this bloody video tonight because I don't know anyone's names. I don't know any tribes' names.
So we've got Renal, who's the leader of she's the wife of the chief.
I'm trying to find the name of the clan.
The
Metkania?
Mekhaina.
Mekhaina. They pronounce it a lot better than I can.
Yeah, Mekhaina. So it's there's Renal and there's Tonawari, who is the leaders. It was interesting to see that when they landed the initial time, it wasn't up to the chieftain; it was up to Renal, which I think was really interesting because it showed that she still had power, even though she wasn't just some side character. She was just as respected as the chief.
Yeah. And this was it. I mean, Kate Winslet, if anyone's curious, Kate Winslet and James Cameron didn't have a smooth time making Titanic 25 years ago. And I think there was a comment made in the decades that followed, like, I will never work with James Cameron again. And here we are on Avatar 2, starring Kate Winslet, who has broken Tom Cruise's record of holding her breath for underwater the most ever in a film at over 7 minutes, which is insane. I don't know how, and not to discredit the achievement, I couldn't even tell you what scene in truth, because all I can think of is her talking to that whale. Whereas at least Tom Cruise's was for an action set piece. If anyone hasn't seen the Mission Impossible action set piece, it's got up today. Christ, go have a look at that if you get 10 minutes after. But talking about the other clan, and kind of this is the world building right at Pandora. One of the big criticisms of Star Wars over the years, and I don't think it's contextually a fault of 77, 80, or 83. I think maybe the more modern Star Wars is every planet's got like one terrain, like the volcano planet, the sand planet, the cold planet, the jungle planet. And I never minded that. And I genuinely, I'm going to lie, I don't mind it either. What I loved about Pandora is that we've spent so long in the jungle in the first film. In the second film, we spent an hour there. Then we're going to go to the water clans. And obviously in the first one, they tease up the other clans, don't they? Now, it's not implied these are the same clans they fought with, but we do see him go to other clans. And to Cameron's credit, I think he spoke about he wants to explore a lot of the clans over the other films.
Yeah.
And kind of the thing about the sequel jumping to the end, I love that they don't be like, oh, see you guys, we're going to go to, I don't know, the cold part of Pandora. It was, we are in with you, the water people. Now, some people might say they missed the jungle, which I get. I'm sure we will return there at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
Futures. But I love the underwater stuff, and kind of talking about the underwater, the tech. This is some of the best filmmaking technology I've seen in my lifetime. And listen, I'm 26. I've not seen as many films as many others would have, or certainly ones that are older. But a really unfair but fair comparison is Wakanda Forever. Now, I enjoyed Wakanda Forever. I love Namor. Underwater filming is not an easy thing for any filmmaker to do. Go far back as Thunderball in '65 with the first underwater action set piece. Look at the Little Mermaid trailer for next year. Look at Black Panther. Look at anything that's shot in real underwater. It is dark. You can't get good lighting. It's not somewhere where people are meant to film. Even Titanic to itself, you don't really get underwater stuff either. It's more about, the water's the death. The underwater stuff in this, I'm just pausing because I just can't get over it still that they spent a year and a half developing technology for people to watch underwater to shoot this film with. And the only other report I can find is that they had to start it in a small tank, and only when it succeeded in a small tank, they then test bigger tanks for the actors to be in to get to the scale of how they wanted to shoot it. And even like the coral reef, James Cameron says they'd put tubes in the water so the actors all had to learn how to basically hold their breath, how to swim. They spent a year, I think Sigourney Weaver said, scuba diving, learning how to dive, so that when we're watching the film, certainly for the experienced divers, it flows because the actors have been trained to swim properly and trained how to scuba dive. And I think it's such a simplistic film trait, but it's such a tough one because a lot of films, and I'm not going to criticize the actual normal code of the faintest clue, but would they have spent a year training how to swim? Probably not, in a nice way. If it has 100% back me and tell me I'm wrong, please do. But seeing that technology, and because of this new tech, the quality of the camera underwater is as good as the camera on land. And I think what James Cameron's doing is he's not taking the piss. It's like the big balls of, I've developed this technology. Now look at me, keep doing shots where we're going to dip in and out of water, without cutting. And I just fundamentally can't wrap my head around how good that tech looks. But you spoke to me about the documentary stuff, which is a really good comparison. What were your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the shots, because when we watched the preview, you told me that it was the first time that mocap was being done underwater. And I didn't know that at the time, but it comes through really well. I mean, some of those shots, like just even when he's when the younger brother is sort of riding with the whale, or just in the water generally with the whale, like and the final scene where Kiri's using the glow plants to get everyone out of the ship, like that sort of stuff. It's just like really well done. Like again, it looks like a documentary. But I think the main thing with that sort of tribe and that sort of thing was I like how they had a different biology because they had 3 fingers, they had flippers, their tails were like fins basically. They had flippers instead of like hands. Um, so I think James Cameron and the world building, the fact that he brought all that into consideration was really well done. And just touching on the clan thing as well, like it came to me when he mentioned that there was the water clan. My mind went to Avatar, as in the cartoon Avatar, because if you don't know about that, there's 4 elements of earth, water, fire, and air. So we've had water, we've had air because they all use the I forgot the birds' names. So I'm expect,
Oh, sorry, carry on. I've forgotten already.
but I'm seriously interested. Is he gonna do like a fire sort of clan where they live in some like just near an active volcano or something like that? Just because that would be amazing. And then have him do an Earth clan, and then you've got the Avatar basically. But that's just my nerdy sort of anime sort of thing.
So I've not seen Avatar, but I know you're a big fan, and I'm going to tell you this: I saw an interview recently. The creator of Avatar, The Last Airbender, said when they went to make the series, which is what would you say, 2003, 2004, maybe? I've never seen it, but I want to say that's about right.
Something
They
like that.
wanted to call it Avatar, but James Cameron had already trademarked the term Avatar. It had been trademarked long before that series had even entered development, which is quite insane. That there are, because I've seen a few comparisons recently, and it will be really interesting. And it goes back to that logistics of the planet that James Cameron. I mean, James Cameron wants to do a fire set, then they're going to need to. No one's going to come out of that scenario alive, but he'll probably try it still. But it's just seeing how this has been done. And Bavaria's but Weta needed 2 years to create the software. Sony developed the camera. I hope Cameron doesn't raise the stage for part 3. If he does, we have to wait years again. Now, part 3 is booked in for 2 years' time, but I don't want to be that guy. Listen, Avatar 2 took 13 years to come out. If you're telling me that Avatar 3, A, is 9 hours long, and is B, going to be done in 2 years' time, the VFX team, which apparently only finished like a month ago, and to Weta's credit now, obviously, there'll be probably stories, but Weta seem to be much better with VFX than Marvel. I'm not here to compare. They've still got the same owners as far as I'm concerned of Disney. The one thing we can't do is fault the visual effects on this film, which is just fundamentally incredible. And I think the big takeaway is patience is a virtue for stuff like this. That we've said it so many times. It's the same with the games industry. Cyberpunk's probably the most famous example. Don't rush. Don't stick to release dates. If it isn't ready, don't release it not being ready. Push it back. It is the right thing to do for the long-term effects. And a lot of films can learn from this, because the problem I have is, yes, this is, I think, the most expensive film ever made now. But the most expensive film ever made should look like the most expensive film ever made. And this does. What I'm now probably horrifically more going to be aggrieved by the next year is going to be $250 million films that look crap. And I'm looking at Marvel. I'm looking at the Marvel TV shows where their budgets are 200 mil. I'm just in a situation, and even Star Wars will be there. Like, you got to take your time. And listen, everyone blames Bob Chapek for everything at Disney. If Iger's in to reset whatever, start with the industry, start with the people that work in it. It's not just exclusive to Disney. I'm just going to really quickly add, it's a lot of these big films, big studio effects. And James Cameron has proven why patience can work. Now, every film can't have a 13-year delay. I'm not dumb. But at the same time, surely these filmmakers are going to be watching this film this December and thinking, if only we'd have took a bit more time and polished some of our effects, it wouldn't look like crap. I'm 56. You have to wait 10 years for each part. My chances to the final part. Don't say that. Listen, they're scheduled in for 2024, 6, 8, and 30, which is 2024, 6, and 8. Which is insane. I mean, if James Cameron is genuinely going to, let's say it finishes with Avatar 5 and it does come out in 2028. James Cameron, to his credit, has spent 30 years developing Avatar films. Then there's immediate respect to anything he does. The fact he's made his last two, was it Titanic 97, this Avatar 09, this 2022? That's 3 films in 25 years. And the gap from True Lies to Titanic is something. But we've spoken a lot about some more underwater tech.
Well, I
Let's
think
talk.
just adding to that point, I think we had that 13-year gap because he was waiting for the tech to catch up. Because when Avatar 1 came out, it was new tech at that time. And then he was waiting for that 13 years for the tech to catch up to what he wanted. Because he seems like one of those directors that's not going to settle for less than what he wants in his head. So
this is George Lucas.
Well, I mean, and I was saying to my dad on the way back, I think 2 years is a sort of understandable wait, because if my theory is correct on like Avatar 3 being a sort of like build up to a battle between all the Na'vi and all the sky people or the humans, I don't think you need more tech for that. You have the tech there now. So I don't think that wait is going to be, that 2-year wait should be fine.
I'm the same as you. I think the gap they've done. I mean, John Lander, the producer, spoke about the script process that they wrote all 4. They did all the 4 together. That was a big chunk of the time in the gaps, developing the technologies. I think they've almost done it in a way that they've spent this 13 years getting the tech, and now it's in. They're locked in. They know what to do, and they're going to make it. And another really good comparison to Star Wars is that ILM. If anyone's not seen the incredible ILM documentary from earlier this year, rushed a bit towards the end, which is the importance of, as far as I'm concerned. But when Jurassic Park came out, George Lucas then said, "Okay, now I know I can make the Star Wars prequels that's been in my head for this long. I will use the tech from Jurassic Park to do this." And that documentary basically explains George Lucas's genius from 1983, as far as I'm concerned, through to the late 90s for the Phantom Menace. And it's worth seeking that out to see how these more technical innovators work. And it's not to disrespect to the film directors. You got your Nolans, who he develops tech on the fly, mainly IMAX. He's got the first ever black and white IMAX film. It's Court of Oppenheimer. It's going to be black and white, but it's never been done. He designed the first ever IMAX handheld camera for Interstellar. That the best directors are often innovators, which is always a great thing for the industry. And when we talk about the cinematic experiences, there's a reason their films are always near the top. It's not senseless. They wait for the cinema. They want you to see it on the big screen. And because they care about our experience watching it, they don't just say, yeah, we know a lot of these make it for themselves. There's nothing wrong with them. They don't obviously ever say that, but they do make it as well for people to experience. They're not saying they're making it for us. They don't make it for fans, but they make it for people to experience at a cinema, which is such a big difference that people don't talk about. And that's where I kind of am with this. And the one thing you can't fault James Cameron for is his third acts are often incredible. And if we start talking about the whaling stuff, which we've got Carl, the whole whale scene hunted. The whale scene hunted affected me more than I was expecting. Was it David Williams in the scene? The whale hunting scene, I almost shed a tear. I didn't, not to be proud of that. That was one of the most depressing things I've ever seen.
Yeah, the most depressing bit of that for me was the calf, sort of nudging its mother. I was like, wow. And the fact that they just dump it as well is the heartlessness of it.
They dump it, and I know unobtainium has become a meme that you've got this unobtainable material, so we call it unobtainium in the first one. All of that was done by these hunters because they've now got the liquids for a vial that you can't age.
Yeah.
And you think that's a little, it's not an Easter egg, but that's a nod at something that's clearly going to be a big thing for whatever they're trying. Because we know the logic of the sky people is that humanity, it's like Interstellar, the Earth is dying, and we need to evolve to Pandora. And every time I say Pandora, it's really hard not to say like Stephen Lang. But the age thing, I love this fact we had hunters. We had oh God, what's his name? Jermaine Clement, who most people will know from What We Do in the Shadows. Oh God, what's the music duo he's part of? The comedy sketch. He's done a lot of stuff. Jermaine Clement popped up, and that was one of the best surprises I've had in a film all year round. There's the fact Jermaine Clement's in Avatar. It doesn't make sense, but it really does make sense. But that third act, it's phenomenal. It's, again, we've spent an hour on land, we've spent an hour in the sea. Now let's just combine it together and just have like 3 massive fucking action set pieces, and it was thoroughly entertaining and so well done. We've got Bavari saying, "Is the filming for 3 nearly done? I assume 3 is just for CG. There's limits how many computers you use and rendering takes time." I believe they've wrapped on Avatar 3, and they are shooting Avatar 4 or have begun shooting some of Avatar 4. So I think it was all from my understanding of Avatar is when they speak about the process, they say that filming is the easiest bit, filming is the quickest bit, filming is the cheapest bit. It's obviously what comes after. So I'm the same as you. I'm curious, and I think I'm all like Ayman. I think the rendered, the skins, the locations they've got now will almost be the same for the third one, and I can see 2 and 3 being almost like a double, a part 1 and part 2 in a sort of really polite way with the water people at least until the full sky people come down. But just going to the scenes of the whales, and this is the kind of genius. I mean, we know that James Cameron's like a proper environmentalist. If anyone's unfamiliar with his career, his documentaries in the deep seas. I think after Avatar 1 came out, he went to the deepest point of Earth and did a documentary there. He's got the Guinness World Record.
As far as you could go. As far as a human could go, yeah.
And which is mental that he did it. And he's always been into this. Look at the Abyss, even Terminator 2, the whole use of the metal almost being liquidized. He's got his sort of fascination, like a lot of great directors do have fascinations with certain things, and it's kind of like his dream, having a water sequence action, and it looked better than any action water set piece. And apologies to Black Panther again, and this is getting compared a lot now. When your third act is just everyone on a boat in the middle of the ocean, it's completely different films. Like Avatar just wipes the floor, and the fact is that they've took time out to show us a whale be hunted like a National Geographic documentary. For us, just think, okay, it's sad they've killed a whale. This will retaliate, but then you just get the genius cuff that the whale we've spent an hour developing our relationship with, who's got a really sad backstory, is the next one. He's in line, and that's your hook of how the action is going to happen. The development of this character out of the blue. And because we've just spent time witnessing how they hunt, it's an extremely smart and quick way to put us into the final action act. And I just think James Cameron nailed it. He never gets action wrong. He's so good at directing action. And I think partially is just the blunt reality of he knows what people enjoy. He probably enjoys making that as well. And he just knows how to do it in such a great way. And I just thought the last hour was worth it. That I think if you hadn't spent time in the water before, you'd have missed out on some really cool stuff in that final hour. Likewise, you needed to build the sky people, but just to make this incredible machine, this big threat at the end, and to save a whale's life, phenomenal.
Yeah, I think the build-up that you get throughout the first 2 hours is it pays off so well. I mean, even little things like the hunting and like when the marine biologist says, or when the hunter says, "I'm the one with the harpoon," and it's like, they're clever. Like when the marine biologist says the whales are more intelligent than us, and it's like, I've got the harpoon, and then it shows the intelligence of the whale when he's destroying the ship, and like when he basically catches the harpoon, and the marine biologist says, "Who's got the harpoon now?" Like, it's just so well done. That whale was like, for me, it was the MVP of that whole end action sequence, because you show that he's got that like sort of sad backstory, because he tried to retaliate, but it ended up not going well at all. It was just a tragedy, and the fact that he was outcast, but the fact that, because I think he connected with the younger brother of the Jake Sully, because he seemed like an outcast as well. He was an outcast of the Water Tribe, but also he was sort of outcast in his own family as well. So they had that connection there, and the fact that the whale saw him in danger and like saw him as one of his own, like one of his people, basically, one of his own kind, and sort of tried to retaliate regardless of how it went last time to protect brother.
Yeah, and I think it worked well. Their relationship, the bond worked, and just with the whole concept of the whale, it looked phenomenal. Like when you were on its, and we said this at the first Avatar, didn't we? The first screening, like when he sat on the fin, that looks like a set. It looks like an actual real thing, and just the how they've developed. And this is why I think this gap to Avatar 2 and 3 is the. And this is gonna, I'm going to simplify it more than I probably it is, but if they've got those character models built very much like animated series, it makes it easier to then move forward. Like if you look at animated shows, very rarely do they ever change the costume because they've had that render in the character animation already. And I felt like Avatar has a lot of this, and that's simplifying an incredibly tough process. But that logically makes sense. That's why I think there won't be as much a jump. And Vivari's put all his ass films don't have a carbon footprint. He built a solar panel in his studio to create electricity for filming. Not sure about the power usage. And this is it. Like, and I don't blame him. You know, and I love the fact that he puts that into his work. That he's not afraid to. That it's what he believes in. And even the first Avatar, of course, was the whole, you know, the Native Americans and stuff like that. And I think I read that he went around the world going to like villages where there were still tribes. He would put money into the villages to then show them Avatar 1. And I was like, I kind of get your logic. This is a bit extreme, but I get your logic of, you know, then showing them Avatar 1. But it certainly felt in this that you can see that passion for his underwater stuff coming through in this. And it's just amazing seeing what they could do with this. And just that last action set piece on the ship as well. It's just what a great. I mean, the whale die. I know that's a trailer shot and it's in the trailers, but the moment the whale's like, you get the point of view of him seeing the gun to the head. It's such a great sequence, and as you said, the fact they just can't harpoon him. And I thought he would go at some point, but he never does. And it's really interesting with this characters and what they do. And again, you know, we're now talking about Avatar with whales as characters that talk and communicate. The Papyrus font it remains strong and is there, and it's just it's an incredible achievement in this. And kind of talking that final act. I just want to quickly mention obviously the oldest brother dies. Caught me off guard. I mean, I saw him get shot when he entered the water because he holds his chest, but I didn't think they'd kill people. And maybe that's naive of me that James Cameron, you know, he almost killed the entire Avatar 1 cast. We go back to that, you know, Michelle Rodriguez wasn't put in an Avatar. Pretty much everyone got killed. The other Na'vi soldiers were just offed one by one. And throughout his work, he's never been afraid to kill off characters, even Terminator films.
Yeah, well, I mean, in Avatar 1, the main character that dies is the son of the chief, Neytiri's brother. So I wasn't surprised that the older brother died, but it was still sort of like, oh wow, he actually did it. He actually killed him, which was surprising as well.
And it was so blunt. Like, there wasn't like a big passing rest of the head. It was like just suddenly died, like in the sentence. And I think there's something not quite real in that respect because obviously it's about blue aliens, but James Cameron knows what he's doing and handling scenarios like that. That we're going to see like Neytiri become unhinged, which we did, which was some of the best moments. Was just her just killing people with no remorse, and
then and then seeing Spider scared of that as well, because he
became afraid for the first time.
Well, because he saw the video and heard her being unhinged at the beginning of the film when she kills the colonel, and then hearing that again would have shown flashbacks and sort of like, is she going to kill me as well? Because he knows that she doesn't like him, and I think he's genuinely afraid at that point. Like, if I come out of here now, I might actually die.
Yeah. And I thought he would. I thought at some point she would kill him, and she almost did. I think, again, if it wasn't for, you know, for the Colonel's loving heart, which he does have, you know, which it was a really interesting bluff. And I feel there's something there moving forward that I thought heading into this film, they'd kill off Neytiri, mainly because, not to disrespect Zoe Saldana, but I think she's a bigger actress in terms of stature and demanding projects from this cast. That you'd assume should be the one they would kill, but I'm glad they didn't. They stuck with her, and to lose one of the younger characters, that kind of propels that other brother into the lead of the series. Like, you know, he feels responsible still, even though he's not. And the dad's understanding with Jake, and I think this is where the character development works. Well.
Yeah,
exactly. And
when because he's one of those like going back to what I said earlier, he seems like an outcast, but then when his brother dies, Jake Sully sees like he says to him, "I see you," and he never said
Yeah,
that to him before. And it's just one of those. It's like really touching because he- it's one of those like he's now embrace. He sees his son as his son. Um, yeah, it's just really touching thing about that.
and on the second watch, because it took me like a couple of hours to figure out which brother's which as well, you didn't really get to appreciate the build up of the outcast son because I just thought they were the same. And I think that's something that really worked better for me, at least on those rewatches. And it'll be really curious, as I said, about what happens to some of the others and moving forward, what he chooses to do in the sequels. And we spoke a lot about the film. We've gone from an hour and 10. If I'm just going to head into my final thoughts on this film
Yeah,
before I really quickly touch upon the box office and the announcement, um, I enjoyed the spectacle of it. I enjoyed the story of it. And I'm in this and ahhing where like I don't ever use the star system unless I'm just on Letterboxd. I don't really care about what I put on Letterboxd, but from a technical perspective, this is one of the best films I've ever seen in my life.
yeah,
The visuals can't be matched. The underwater technology development is just unhumane. The 40 frames per second I thought worked very well, and I'm curious about that technology moving forward. And if they continue on the Avatar films, it was something that probably gets better with time. I can't wrap my head around how this film has been made, and I'm glad I've experienced it the right way at a
mm,
cinema in an IMAX with 3D.
yeah,
Um, and as I said, the story, you don't need a deep, advanced story for a film like
mm,
this. It's not designed to be like that. It's you look at why the first one was successful. There's nothing wrong with simplistic storytelling. It's about experiencing the wonder of the big screen, about experiencing other worlds we can't be a part of. Now, there is, I believe, a real depression or a syndrome of kind
yeah. I've
called
heard
PADS,
about
which
that.
is about Pandora or something, which I heard about. Post Pandora depression syndrome or something, I think it's called.
Yeah,
It's a real thing, apparently. No, I don't have it, but I'm just there like, to go like taking off those glasses on that first viewing, it was like the Matrix, like, whoa, like I'm back in reality now. Like we've spent 3 hours
yeah,
on the same planet. And I think with this film, because it is pretty much all blue people bar Spider and
mm,
the woman from the Sopranos, it's a very strange experience in that respect. And I absolutely loved it. And now I've spoken about it
mm,
more. I'm gonna see it again. I'm gonna see it a third time. Probably do it in the new year when things are quieter,
yeah,
or hopefully the crowds are quieter. Um, but yeah, for me at least, it's in my top 10 of the year. And again, for me, it's that respective. This is where the filmmaking comes into it, and that's the
mm.
side of film that I've always been drawn to is the technical side of it, how it's made, what text are being used, what's it going to do moving forward, and that's kind of how I sit with it. What about you?
Well, for me, I mean, I texted you when I got out of the film. I think it's my film of the year. That might be recency bias as well, a little bit, but I'm not too sure. Because I mean, the only other films that stand out that I've watched this year are the Marvel films, which they they've been okay, but they haven't been on this level. I know that you went to see Top Gun a lot. I haven't seen that, so it's one of those. But I think the main thing that I can compare it with was like with June last year. That was my film of the year, and I saw that 6 or 7 times in the cinema. And I mean, for me, if I want to see a film more than twice in the cinema, is that has to be my top film of the year. I mean, even because I took my dad on Sunday, and he's not one to watch films more than once in the cinema. But even he's talking about going back over the Christmas period between Christmas and New Year, trying to fit in another showing of it, which just shows like how good he found it as well. And I think I'm the same. Like I am, I'll probably try and get another showing in between Christmas and the New Year, and then possibly in again in January, because I don't think anything else is coming to the IMAX until
Ant
February.
Man.
Yeah, which is February
January
now.
is an Oscar month in the UK, and no one's going to release a big film near Avatar. It'd
Yeah,
be financial suicide.
yeah. So I think yeah, when it's definitely in between Christmas and New Year, and potentially one or two more in January, depending on what else is going on. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that I'd want like, and not to be a little bit of a snob about it, but I don't think I will watch it in the higher frame rate if I can. I don't. I might watch
You
it
don't
in
want to
the
watch it.
non.
You don't want to watch it in 24, do you?
Not really, no, because it's one of those where it lends itself so well to the high frame rate. It's specifically done with a high frame rate in mind, so I want to
Yeah,
watch it as James
in high frame.
Cameron intended it to be watched.
And that's right though. You're right to say that, and others are right to go along with it. To me, it's the cinema experience.
Hmm.
I saw Top Gun Maverick 6 times this year at the cinema. 5 of them on IMAX, 1 of them on 4DX, and the 4DX was great, but I missed that top and bottom of the screen. Why? Because it was shot on the IMAX cameras. And Avatar is the same. I can't imagine seeing it on a normal 2D. I don't know why it was at the Dolby in Leicester Square, this press screening. I know it's very snobby. Should have been at the Cineworld with the 3D IMAX, with a laser projection. Dolby 3D is not better than IMAX 3D. That is 100% certified. And Bavaria Great. My rating on it is 2 points. Am I happy that I spent money for the movie or not? If I'm in saying it's a good movie. And this is kind of it. And that's how I've always experienced it. It's the lowest common denominator of an audience member. And yet people want to turn their nose up at the hard, real truth. The purpose of film is to entertain others. Now, yes, you can go and make a very in-depth film telling a story of real life events or whatnot, which is also understandably fine. But the purpose of film is, to me, is entertainment. It is to educate, or as in this case, it is. I kind of contradict myself there, but it's going to the cinema. They didn't make films for you to watch at home, and if they do, they're Netflix, and more often than not, they're crap because studios don't want to pick them up. You get the odd gem. Don't the odd gem tell you that it was a good idea in the first place. And this is where it is. People are going to go watch Avatar. People want to experience this film. And this is how it's been. And just talk this opening weekend, because it's done out in some of the discussions I sent. It's opened with $434 million worldwide for an opening weekend, which I think is the second highest post-pandemic release after No Way Home. December last year slot. And people are talking about the China box office being a disappointment, and China's got loads of political stuff happening as well. They went from a so-called 200 mil opening weekends to it being, I think, 55 mil opening weekends because there's a lot of things happening there, which is way past my pay grade to know about. And even with America, like people are talking about audiences dropping off. It didn't make a 200 mil opening in America. Avatar 1 made $75 million on its opening weekend. It became the highest grossing film in history. Titanic did not open to a high number. Titanic opened to 50 mil. It became the highest grossing film in history. Now, this isn't going to be the highest grossing film in history, but this is not a box office bomb or a flop or anything like that. This has got legs. James Cameron's films work different than box office, and Marvel films have morphed the internet into thinking that if a film doesn't make a platonic amount of money on its first week, it's a failure. Absolutely not. Top Gun Maverick had a soft opening. It's at 1.4 billion because every week people went back to it. And as I said, nothing's coming out really till Ant-Man in February. All the Oscar films are out in America. We're getting them all in January. They are not going to make a dent on a box office for a film like this. And for as long as people talk about the experience of watching Avatar on the big screen, they will go and experience it on the big screen. And I wouldn't be surprised if it hits a point where they just re-release the first Avatar film. And I'd also argue that Disney will hold off on the Disney Plus release date, like what they did with Top Gun, because if people know they can't see this at home for 4 or 5 months, they'll go to the cinema.
They're gonna, exactly.
If you know you can watch it at home in a month, you'll wait. And people do that. The general audience does that. So the box office is an interesting thing. It's going to be more of a conversation to follow rather than make statements about now. If it drops this weekend, just like 50 mil worldwide, then that's not good. But it's not going to. So that's my box office rant. That's been our review in a weird way. It's been a fun discussion. We've gone almost an hour and a half. And I kind of said there'd be an announcement. So I know we've got a great comment by Bavaria, actually. Let me just quickly bring this one up. The IMAX theaters are always full in the US, and the drop from Friday to Saturday is lower than for Maverick. I believe that people want to see it on IMAX. The ratings are grade A on Cinema Score, and this is it. People do want to see it, and people will see it. And like Top Gun, and to Top Gun's credit, it came out during a blockbuster season, a very awful blockbuster season, but a blockbuster season nonetheless. But moving forward, this is the last big film of 2022. There is going to be. I thought this was going to be the last review on the channel for 2022, but next week there's going to be a White Noise review, which is the new Adam Driver film. I saw that on Friday, and there might be a 4K home media review. Asterisk: will any posts get delivered on Boxing Day or the 27th. I don't know. So potentially there's a kick-ass 4K review. And for anyone curious about the home media reviews, we don't just get given free copies. Sometimes we have to buy them. Sometimes we got offered ones to review, but they will sit in that collection behind me. But I'll go over more of that next week. But me and Tate are going to be doing a big stream at the start of the year. We're going to, as we did last year, we're going to preview, I say last year, this year, we're going to preview a lot of the big things we've got starting up. We've got The Last of Us coming in mid-January. We've got some big film series that are going to come out in the year. And we've got a couple of our own series. You know, we've just come off the back of Steven Spielberg retrospective. That was 36 weeks. That was watching a film of his, reviewing it, editing it, getting guests for 36 weeks, 9 months of the year. So you can understand that we've had a nice quieter December. We've not done too much, but we're having a good chat. Tate's in Austria now. He's been watching films tonight, which I'm going to bring up in a minute. But yeah, so we're going to do a big stream to announce the big stuff for the year. But in advance of that stream, we're going to do a lovely short series at the start of January, and it's going to take us through to mid-February. And if you haven't already worked that, why I'm announcing it tonight, it was spoken about a couple of months ago. We are doing a James Cameron retrospective for the channel. This is something that we had in the pipeline throughout this year. We spoke about it at the start of the year. We couldn't make it work pre-Avatar, thanks to the Spielberg series. Also, thanks to his amazing Avatar remaster, you know, it wouldn't have worked logically. So, this is the schedule. Starting on Wednesday, the 4th of January, we will be reviewing Piranha 2 this morning. And every Wednesday for the first 6 weeks, we are going to review a James Cameron film leading up to Titanic. And you might be wondering, why is there not a 1 week gap for Titanic? On the 10th of February next year, the Titanic is having a massive 4K high frame rate remaster, like the first Avatar film. James Cameron has been working on it behind the scenes for a couple of years, and it is going to come out in February. It would have been the anniversary, which is this week, but obviously they're not doing that due to the obviously Avatar 2 coming out, which would be stupid. So that's going to be our first main series for the year, and that will outro with it being live on the Sunday, as I said, in which the Titanic is released in cinemas and IMAX, which will be quite exciting. So if you're a fan of James Cameron, stick around for the channel for the first few weeks. And just in case you missed our first Avatar review, we're not reviewing the Avatars. We've done Avatar 1 in September. We've done The Way of Water tonight. They'll be at the front of the playlist. And then moving forward is a retrospective looking at everything up to Titanic. So when the series is done, we will have reviewed all of James Cameron's stuff. And I hope that you will get to enjoy it, because we like doing director retrospectives. It's something a bit different. It's a great way for us to see more films. And in terms of James Cameron, he's made some of the biggest action set pieces, some of the biggest action films of all time. It's a nice short series to enter 2023 with. And as I said, in January, we'll announce a couple more of the other big shows we're going to be working on next year. But that is the first one we'll be talking about. So that is going to do it for the Avatar review. We've got another comment. Puss in Boots 2 will maybe a surprise, at least a Christmas family movie. Well, I believe the UK is not going to get it for like 4 months. And surprisingly, it's getting very good reviews. And it's been in development hell for many a year. So who knows? That could be it could be the Jumanji to what The Last Jedi was in terms of box office. But we want to hear from everyone. So if you're not watching live, if you're watching on demand, please do comment with your thoughts on Avatar: The Way of Water. As I said, this has been a spoiler discussion. Comment whatever you want about the film, your thoughts on James Cameron, the man, the myth, the legend, all that sort of stuff. We've got a lot of prep to do for this series. I say a lot of prep. Most of the prep's done. It was done a long time ago. As I mentioned, the thumbnails were done in January this year. But there's a few other things I need to work on. So I want to make some changes. And we'll have more details in our New Year stream. And what is coming up? Tomorrow, we've got a very special video going out. You may be familiar with Reese, who's been on the channel a lot this year. He runs the cinematic.com, which is a great website to check out for reviews. He's also got a YouTube channel, Reese's Positive POV. To his credit, he has devised a 100 greatest films of all time list. And the beauty of the list is it was submitted by people that are on Film Twitter. We have over 100 people that submitted into this. Over 400 films were brought up in the discussion. And the countdown video announcing this list of the 100 will go up tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. on this channel. And then following from that, it's going to link into their website. We'll have a letterbox list and everything. So the cinematic and cinema savvy's 100 top films of all time, as voted for by Film Twitter, is going to go up tomorrow evening on the channel. So if you're a fan of film, do check that out. It is pre-recorded, it's edited, it's done. It's 30 minutes. It's not an in-depth mega piece like the Bond ranking. It's a nice, easy video, and maybe there's some films in there you'll agree with, some you disagree with. But yeah, I said we're moving into that time of year. There's lists of videos, there's everything. There's a lot of videos happening, and as we always say, anything to announce, we'll put them on social media. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy, and a link to Redbubble in the description below. Ayman, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know we've planned this for a while. Even go back to the first Avatar viewing, we said, get you on for the sequel, and I'm glad we have. And to everyone that's been commenting along to Carlos Bavari, thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed the video. We hope you've enjoyed the stream. And yeah, be sure to join us on the next one. Take care.